What comes to mind when we think about war, death, destruction, famine, or the loss of freedom? But what if war is no longer about death, no longer about hunger, and no longer about right and wrong? What if the wars we will face in the future are about something far more absolute, the total collapse of civilization? All internet will go down. Money will no longer function. Millions of people lie collapsed on the ground, billions face starvation. Animals perish. Fruits and all plants can no longer be consumed. Poison and oxygen struggle for dominance in the air. Wildfires and tsunamis erupt across every ocean on Earth. Earthquakes follow one after another every hour, and the sky turns completely dark. For years, the sun is no longer visible. What once felt like an image of the apocalypse becomes a tangible reality. Humanity is left crammed inside bunkers, waiting for death, surviving on whatever food and water remain. All the darkness and horror I've just described were outcomes predicted by Albert Einstein 2 years after the end of World War II. In his warning, Einstein said that a third world war would inevitably send humanity back to the Stone Age. And now, perhaps we are already halfway toward what Einstein once predicted. Before we go any further into what Einstein meant by his statement, it is important to first examine the context in which he made that prediction. What Einstein warned in 1947 cannot be separated from the Second World War. Nuclear weapons, the most terrifying threat to the survival of humanity, were, indirectly, a product of Einstein's own ideas. It all began with the theory of relativity proposed by Einstein. That theory later became one of the fundamental principles behind the working mechanism of the atomic bomb. Adding to this, the origins of the Manhattan Project were inspired by then U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, following a letter sent by Einstein. After reading Einstein's letter, Roosevelt swiftly formed the Uranium Advisory Committee, which would later evolve into the Manhattan Project, bringing together some of the world's leading scientists under the leadership of J. Robert Oppenheimer. From this project emerged a devastating creation, the atomic bomb that destroyed the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Although Einstein was never directly involved in the Manhattan Project or in the actual construction of atomic and nuclear weapons, his theory of relativity was what made nuclear energy theoretically possible in the first place. Because of that, Einstein was haunted by deep regret throughout his life, knowing that one of the most terrifying weapons of mass destruction was built upon his scientific work. Confronted with this reality, Einstein openly expressed profound remorse. In an interview with Newsweek in 1947, Einstein said, "If I had known that the Germans would fail to develop the atomic bomb, I would have done nothing." Einstein grew increasingly regretful and angry when, in July 1946, Time magazine featured him on its cover alongside the formula E=mc², set against the backdrop of an atomic bomb explosion. In other words, Einstein was acutely aware of the impact nuclear weapons could have on the survival of human civilization. 2 years after the Second World War ended, specifically in March 1947, a report emerged from liberal Judaism describing a conversation between Einstein and his fellow scientists at a dinner party. At that party, Einstein was asked by Alfred Werner what new weapons might be used in the Third World War. Shocked by the question and weighed down by his own regret, Einstein shook his head. After a few moments of silence, he replied that he did not know what weapons would be used in the Third World War. But there was no doubt, he said, about the weapons that would be used in the Fourth. His fellow scientists pressed on, asking what those weapons would be. Einstein answered, spears and stones. Einstein said this because he believed that if a Third World War were to truly break out, nations would inevitably resort to nuclear weapons. And when such a war finally ended, the world would be left in total ruin, where the only weapons remaining to humanity would be sticks and stones. For those of us who were born and grew up in peaceful times, it is probably hard to imagine the darkness and suffering of war. Einstein, however, was a living witness to two major world wars. During the Second World War, he was even part of the circle surrounding key wartime decision-makers. It is therefore not surprising that Einstein understood how destructive technological progress can be when it is used to support warfare. That is why he predicted that a Third World War would force human civilization back into the Stone Age. Through this prediction, Einstein was indirectly saying that a Third World War would be extremely terrifying and devastating, and could possibly mark the end of human existence. After all, the two wars recorded in history show that war has always been about death and destruction. Now, if a Third World War were to truly happen, what guarantee is there that major powers would not destroy each other using nuclear weapons with total destructive potential? After the Cold War ended, major countries such as the United States and Russia continued to threaten one another with their deadly nuclear arsenals. And since the end of the Second World War, there have been several incidents across the world that nearly pushed human history into a Third World War. Today, our sense of alertness is growing as global conflicts continue to escalate and become more real. Because of this, a Third World War is no longer impossible. It could be triggered in the Middle East, Greenland, or even the Arctic. This leads to an important question: what would actually happen if a Third World War were to break out? And can Einstein's warning that such a war could push human civilization back into the Stone Age be justified? According to a report from the American educational website Finding Dulcinea, one of the most significant impacts of a Third World War would be the loss of trust among powerful countries. As trust fades, diplomatic relations would be cut off, tensions would rise, and peaceful solutions would become increasingly difficult. The global economy would also be affected if a Third World War were to break out. Financial markets would fall into chaos, international trade would be disrupted, and even countries with the most stable economies could collapse. As many nations focus on war and geopolitical competition, trade agreements could fall apart overnight and broad sanctions could be imposed. In addition, global supply chains would face serious challenges as countries rush to enforce strict measures. Critical assets such as communication networks and key infrastructure would likely become primary targets during a Third World War. War would also force millions of people in conflict zones to leave their homes in search of safer places. These refugees would likely seek asylum in neighboring countries, and host nations would be overwhelmed by the large influx of displaced people. As fighting spreads into agricultural regions, trade would come to a halt because farmland would be damaged and food supplies would become insufficient. In addition, if war were to occur, food supplies and stockpiles would become difficult to obtain. Famine would follow. And the thing Einstein feared most in his warning was the use of nuclear weapons. The explosion of a single nuclear bomb could destroy vast areas and potentially trigger a global disaster unlike anything in human history. When a nuclear explosion occurs, it sends out a wave of electromagnetic radiation that can disable electrical systems and even knock out electricity across an entire country. Furthermore, nuclear war would cause extraordinary human suffering. In addition to the millions of people who would die instantly from the explosions, many others would suffer burns, radiation injuries, and diseases related to radiation exposure. Medical and healthcare systems would collapse, making rescue and treatment efforts very difficult. What is even more frightening than the immediate destruction of nuclear war is the long-term environmental impact that would occur. In 1982, atmospheric scientist Paul Crutzen wrote a short paper explaining that nuclear war would produce massive clouds of smoke. This is because nuclear bomb explosions create radioactive mushroom clouds that spread dangerous particles into the atmosphere. This would lead to acid rain, a drop in global temperatures, and radioactive pollution that contaminates soil, water, and biological resources. As a result, ecosystems would be severely damaged, biodiversity would be threatened, and radiation effects would impact future generations. After nuclear explosions, heavy rain would fall sometime later, consisting of thick, dark, oily droplets that could kill billions of people. This did happen in Hiroshima, where black rain fell about 20 minutes after the bomb was dropped. The rain covered an area stretching up to 20 kilometers around the blast site and carried radiation levels up to 100 times stronger. the radiation in this rain was strong enough to cause changes in human blood. What is most horrifying is that the effects of this radiation still remain at the site to this day. Another possible outcome is the formation of a dark smoke cloud reaching up to 15 kilometers above the Earth's surface. This cloud would be carried and spread by winds, eventually covering the entire planet and blocking the sky. These effects would occur in the first years after a large-scale nuclear exchange. It has even been suggested that humans might not see a clear sky for up to 30 years. Nuclear war would also affect global temperatures, making it extremely difficult for societies to produce food. This would happen because sunlight would be blocked, causing a drastic drop in world temperatures. Humans would live without summer, animals would starve, and crops would wither and die. During the first 5 years after a nuclear disaster, deadly frost would occur and severely disrupt growing seasons. After that, there would be a period of calm and temperatures would gradually return to normal. However, this would only happen around 25 years later. Atmospheric processes triggered by the damage would begin to tear apart the ozone layer. Even a small nuclear war using just 0.03% of the world's nuclear weapons could destroy 50% of the ozone layer. As a result, the Earth would slowly be damaged by intense ultraviolet (UV) radiation. From all the horrifying impacts of nuclear war, Einstein's prediction seems very accurate. A third world war would be extremely destructive to the survival of the Earth and everything on it. It is therefore reasonable that Einstein imagined World War III as a collapse of human civilization back into the Stone Age. It is even possible that a nuclear war in a third world war would become the path toward the end of humanity.